The sun hung low in the sky, casting a warm golden light over the busy market. People hustled and bustled, buying and selling, laughing and shouting as the sound of street vendors calling out their goods filled the air. Ravi, a thin man with tired eyes and a rough, worn-out appearance, walked through the crowded streets. He wasn't here to buy anything. Today he had come to beg. His heart felt heavy with worry. His wife, Neha, had been sick for the past few days, unable to get out of bed. The fever wouldn't go away, and she didn't have the strength to care for their baby Aryan, who had just turned 3 months old. The poor child, innocent and fragile, was crying constantly, his small body hungry and weak. Ravi's heart broke every time he heard his baby's cries echoing in the small house they called home. But there was nothing he could do. With his pockets empty and no money to buy milk for the child, Ravi had no choice but to turn to the market, hoping someone would take pity on him. He couldn't stop thinking about Aryan's cries. The baby's needs were simple, just a bottle of milk to calm him, to stop his tears, but Ravi had nothing to offer in return. His pride had been shattered, but for the sake of his child, he couldn't turn back. Ravi walked with his head lowered, feeling the stares of the people around him. His clothes were old and faded, and his shoes were worn down from walking long distances in search of work, but no job seemed to come. As he moved through the market, he saw mothers with their children, people chatting happily, and vendors laughing with customers. It all seemed so far out of his reach. He had nothing, and he was scared for his baby. He approached a few women who were sitting nearby, some with baskets of fruit and others selling small items like bread or jewelry. He asked them politely at first, "Please, could you spare some milk for my baby? He's hungry and my wife is too weak to feed him." But the women didn't even look up. They ignored him, too busy with their own lives, or perhaps too tired of the constant begging they saw every day. Ravi felt a pang of shame. He hated to beg, but he had no choice. As he moved on, he tried again with another woman, this time an older lady selling vegetables. She gave him a quick glance, shook her head, and said, "I'm sorry, son. I can't help you." He walked on, feeling smaller with every rejection. His heart was heavy, but he kept walking. The city was so full of people, yet he felt so alone. His mind raced as he thought about his wife lying in bed, feverish and weak, and his baby, crying for milk. How could he face them? How could he tell Neha that he couldn't provide for their child? As the afternoon sun grew hotter, Ravi's legs felt like they would give out beneath him. His stomach growled, but there was no food in his pockets. The streets, which had once seemed full of promise, now felt like an endless maze. How could a man find hope in a world so indifferent to his suffering? But then, as if the universe had heard his silent plea, something caught his eye. A woman was standing by a small stall selling spices and herbs. Her clothes were simple, but she had an air of calm about her. She wasn't rushing, wasn't distracted by the noise of the market. She stood quietly, as though waiting for something. Ravi hesitated for a moment, unsure whether to approach her. He had been rejected so many times today, and the thought of more rejection filled him with dread. But his baby's cries echoed in his mind, and with no other choice, he slowly walked toward her stall. "Excuse me," Ravi said softly, not wanting to be a bother. "Please, can you help me? My wife is sick and my baby is hungry. I don't have any money, but can you spare some milk for him?" The woman, who had been arranging some herbs on her table, looked up at him. There was a kindness in her eyes, but also something else, something that made Ravi pause. She seemed to understand, not just his words, but the helplessness in his voice. She studied him for a moment, then smiled gently. "I have some milk here," she said, motioning to a small bottle beside her. "I keep it for my grandchildren when they come to visit." Ravi's heart leaped with hope. "Please," he said almost breathlessly, "could you give it to me? My baby needs it." The woman looked at him for a moment longer, and then, surprisingly, she reached for the bottle and handed it to him. "Take it," she said simply. "Feed your baby." Ravi took the bottle in his hands, feeling a rush of gratitude. He could hardly believe it. He had come to the market with nothing, but this kind woman had given him what he needed to care for his child. "Thank you," he said quietly, his voice thick with emotion. "You don't know how much this means." The woman nodded, a soft smile on her lips. "Take care of your family," she said. "That's all that matters." Ravi, still in shock, thanked her again and turned to leave. But as he walked away, he realized that something inside him had changed. The weight on his chest had lifted just a little. He wasn't alone anymore. There were still kind people in the world, And for the first time that day, he felt a glimmer of hope. With the milk in hand, he rushed home to his wife and child, determined to give his baby what he needed. The path ahead was still uncertain, but at least for now his child would not go hungry. And for that, Ravi was grateful. The sun was beginning to set as Ravi hurried home with the bottle of milk tightly clutched in his hand. His mind was racing and his heart pounded with both relief and gratitude. He had only hoped to find someone who could give him a little milk for his baby. But now he had received so much more: kindness, compassion, and the hope of a better tomorrow. As Ravi reached the narrow alley where he lived, he could already hear the soft sound of his baby's cries drifting from inside. His wife Neha was still ill, barely able to get out of bed. The weight of her condition had been a burden on both of them. For days she had been too weak to even sit up, let alone care for their baby. Ravi had done his best to comfort her, but there was only so much he could do. Ravi pushed open the wooden door to their small, humble home, the familiar creak of the hinges barely audible over the sound of his baby's cries. Inside, Neha was lying on the bed, her face pale and tired. She looked up as Ravi entered, her eyes softening when she saw the bottle of milk in his hand. "Did you find it?" she asked, her voice barely above a whisper. She could barely move, but her concern for their child was clear. Ravi nodded, his face lighting up with relief. "Yes, I did. There was a kind woman at the market. She gave me some milk for Aryan." Neha's eyes widened, a mixture of surprise and gratitude flashing across her face. "A stranger gave you milk? That's so generous." Ravi set the bottle down on the small table beside the bed and then gently took Aryan from Neha's arms. The baby, still crying, was weak from hunger, his small body trembling. Ravi could feel his own heart breaking as he looked at his son. Aryan's cries tugged at him, and Ravi quickly began to feed him, holding the bottle carefully and watching as the baby's little hands reached up toward it. As the milk flowed into the baby's mouth, the crying slowly stopped, replaced by quiet sucking sounds. Neha watched, a soft smile spreading across her face as she saw her child finally being fed. She had been so worried, so tired, but now she could see the light of hope shining through. She was grateful for the kindness of the stranger, but she was also amazed at how much it meant to her husband. Ravi sat next to Neha, holding Aryan close, his eyes filled with love for both his wife and child. He never thought he would be in a position like this where asking for help would be the only way to care for his family. But as he looked down at his son, now calm and content, he knew that what mattered most was that Aryan was fed, safe, and loved. The next few days passed in a quiet routine. Neha continued to rest, still too weak to do much, and Ravi did his best to take care of everything around the house. But it was clear that the situation was difficult. They had little money, and with Neha's illness, Ravi was struggling to keep up with everything. He had been going to the market every day, trying to find odd jobs, but it was never enough. But there was one thing Ravi hadn't expected. The woman from the market, the one who had given him the milk, continued to return to their home. At first, Ravi thought it was a coincidence. Maybe she just felt a passing sympathy for him and his family. But each day, without fail, the woman would show up at their door. She brought food, fresh vegetables, and sometimes even small treats for Aryan. Every time she would offer a warm smile, and Ravi would feel a sense of gratitude that he could hardly put into words. One afternoon, as Ravi was sitting by the window, watching the children play in the street, there was a knock on the door. He opened it to find the woman standing there, as always, holding a basket of food. "Hello, Ravi." She greeted him with a gentle smile. "I thought I'd bring some more food. You must be running low by now." Ravi couldn't help but be surprised. "You've already helped us so much," he said, his voice filled with both thanks and disbelief. Why do you keep doing this?" The woman, whose name was Leela, smiled softly. "I see a lot of people in need," she explained, her voice calm and steady. "But there's something about your family, something that touched my heart. I've been through hard times too, and I know what it feels like to need help. So I'm just doing what I can." Ravi stood there speechless for a moment. He had never met someone like her before. Her generosity seemed endless, and it was so different from the coldness he had experienced from others in the market. "You don't have to do this," Ravi said quietly, his eyes filled with emotion, "but I can't tell you how much this means to me." "To all of us," Leela simply nodded. "You're welcome," she said before glancing at the baby, who was now sleeping peacefully in his crib. "It's good to see him resting. He's a strong little boy." Over the next few weeks, Leela continued to visit, but what started as a simple act of kindness soon turned into something much more meaningful. One day, when Neha was feeling particularly weak, Leela insisted on staying to help with the baby. "I can feed him if you like," she offered. "I've been a mother myself, and I know how tiring it can be." Neha, though hesitant at first, agreed. She trusted Leela, and she could see how much she cared for their child. Leela gently lifted Aryan from his crib and began to feed him. The sight of another woman caring for her child was strange at first, but Neha felt no jealousy. Instead, there was only a deep sense of gratitude. Ravi, watching from the doorway, felt a strange mix of emotions. He was grateful to Leela for everything she had done, but he couldn't help but feel a pang of discomfort. It was one thing to receive help, but this felt different. As the days passed, Leela's visits became more frequent. She began to do more than just bring food or milk. She helped with cleaning, cooking, and even took over some of the household chores that Neha had been too sick to manage. It was clear that Leela had become a steady presence in their lives. At first, Ravi had been hesitant to accept her help. But as time went on, he realized that Leela wasn't just offering help. She was offering something deeper. She was offering love, the kind of love that didn't expect anything in return. The kind of love that could heal wounds, both physical and emotional. One afternoon, as Ravi sat with Leela in the small living room, he realized something that surprised him. He didn't just see her as a stranger anymore. He saw her as part of his family. As the weeks passed, Ravi and Neha grew accustomed to Leela's frequent visits. At first, they had seen her kindness as just a temporary gesture, something born from pity or a sense of duty. But as time went on, they realized that Leela wasn't just helping them out of obligation. She had become a part of their daily lives in a way they hadn't expected. She wasn't just giving milk or food. She was giving something far more precious: her time, her care, and her love. Leela's visits began to feel less like charity and more like the actions of a true friend. Every morning, she would come over with a basket of fresh vegetables or fruits from her small garden. Sometimes she brought homemade bread or a hot meal she had prepared herself. She would ask about Neha's health and offer advice on how to ease her discomfort. And every time, her eyes would soften when she saw Aryan. Leela never complained. Whether it was holding the baby, cooking meals, or cleaning the house, she did everything with a calm and gentle spirit. Neha had always been the type of person to take pride in taking care of her home and family. But now, with her health in such a fragile state, it was impossible for her to do much. And so Leela stepped in without hesitation. In the quiet moments of the day, when the sun hung low in the sky and the air was filled with the peaceful sounds of the neighborhood, Ravi would sit with Leela and watch as she cradled the baby, whispering soft words of comfort. Leela's touch was tender, and her voice soothing as she rocked the baby gently to sleep. Ravi often found himself lost in thought, watching the two of them. He had never imagined this kind of situation, his own family being cared for by a stranger. But what amazed him most was the bond that was forming between Leela and Aryan. It was almost as though Leela had stepped into the role of a mother, even though she wasn't the baby's biological parent. Aryan responded to her touch as though he recognized her as someone who loved him deeply. On one particular evening, as Ravi sat in the living room watching Leela feed Aryan, he couldn't help but think about how much had changed in their lives. His family had gone from struggling to survive to having someone who cared for them unconditionally. It was a kind of love that he couldn't explain, but he felt it every time Leela came into their home. She wasn't just helping them out of kindness. She had become a part of their family, a second mother to Aryan. "Leela," Ravi said one evening as he watched her softly hum to the baby, "I don't know how to thank you for everything you've done. You've done more for us than anyone else ever has." Leela paused for a moment, looking up at him with a soft smile. "You don't have to thank me, Ravi," she said, her voice warm. "I'm just doing what anyone should do when they see someone in need. I know what it's like to feel lost and helpless. I just want to help, and seeing Aryan happy and healthy is all the thanks I need." Ravi was silent for a moment, taking in her words. He thought about his own struggles, how just a few weeks ago he had felt like there was no way out of their misery. But now, thanks to Leela, things seemed brighter. His wife, Neha, had started to regain some strength, and Arian's cries had turned into soft giggles. It was a small, quiet miracle, but it was a miracle nonetheless. As the days passed, Ravi noticed that Arian had begun to form a strong attachment to Leela. He would reach for her when she came into the room, and his eyes would light up with recognition whenever he saw her. Leela, too, seemed to grow more attached to the baby with each passing day. It was no longer just about feeding him or taking care of him. She was nurturing him, loving him as if he were her own. One afternoon, when Neha was feeling a little stronger, she sat up in bed and watched as Leela cradled Arian in her arms. Neha's eyes were filled with a mixture of emotions, gratitude, sadness, and something else she couldn't quite name. It was strange to see another woman holding her child with such tenderness, but there was no jealousy in her heart, only appreciation. She knew that Arian needed this, and for some reason Leela was exactly what he needed. "Leela," Neha said softly, her voice still weak but filled with sincerity. "Thank you. I know it's not easy, and I can see how much you care for Arian. You've helped us more than words can say." Leela looked up at Neha, her expression soft. "You don't need to thank me, Neha. I'm happy to help. He's a sweet little boy, and I'm glad I can be here for him, and for you both." For the first time in weeks, Neha felt a sense of peace wash over her. She was no longer afraid that her baby would suffer because of her illness. She could rest knowing that Leela was there to help her, to help them. Ravi noticed the change in his wife. Her expression had softened. Her eyes were brighter and she seemed to have more energy. Leela's presence in their home had not only helped Arian, but had also lifted Neha's spirits. Ravi could see the bond forming between the two women. It was as if they had known each other for years, as if they were family. One evening, as the three of them sat together in the small living room, a sense of calm filled the air. Leela was sitting on the floor playing with Arian as he crawled around the room. Neha was resting on the couch, her hand resting gently on her stomach. Ravi sat nearby watching the scene unfold before him. It was a moment of peace, a moment of warmth that he never thought he would experience again. He realized something then. Despite the hardships they had faced, despite the struggles and the fear, they had been given something priceless. A second chance. And it wasn't just from Leela's kindness. It was from the love they had all shared. Love had bound them together in ways he never could have imagined. In the middle of their struggles, they had found a family, not through blood, but through compassion. Ravi looked at Leela, who was smiling down at Arian as he giggled and played with her fingers. His heart swelled with gratitude. He didn't know what the future held, but he knew that no matter what, they were no longer alone. It had been weeks since Leela had first come into Ravi and Neha's lives. What had begun as a simple act of kindness had transformed into something far deeper, an unspoken bond that tied them all together. Leela, once a stranger, had become a vital part of their family, caring for their child Arian as if he were her own. Neha, though still recovering, felt a sense of peace and gratitude for the woman who had shown them so much love. But as time passed, something began to change in Leela. She had started coming over less frequently, her visits becoming spaced out, and Ravi noticed it right away. At first, he thought it was just a natural shift, something to be expected. Leela had her own life after all, and though she had made their home part of hers, it wasn't possible for her to be there all the time. One afternoon, as Ravi sat by the window watching the street, he caught sight of Leela walking toward their house. But there was something different about her this time. She wasn't carrying the usual basket of food or offering her usual smile. Instead, she looked quiet, almost as if she were lost in thought. When she entered the room, there was a hesitation in her steps. "Leela," Ravi greeted her, standing up with a curious look on his face. "Is everything all right?" Leela nodded, though there was a distant look in her eyes. "Yes, everything's fine," she replied softly. But her voice didn't have its usual warmth. Ravi could tell that something was bothering her. "You don't seem fine," he said gently, his concern growing. "You've been distant lately. Is there something on your mind?" Leela sat down on the couch, taking a deep breath. She looked at Arian, who was playing on the floor, and then back at Ravi. For a long moment she said nothing, as if choosing her words carefully. Finally she spoke. "I've been thinking a lot lately, Ravi," she began, her voice trembling slightly. "About Arian, about you and Neha, and about me." Ravi felt a pang of worry in his chest. He hadn't expected this conversation, and it made him uneasy. "What about you, Leela?" he asked, trying to keep his tone gentle. Leela's eyes filled with emotion as she looked down at the baby. "I've grown so attached to him, to both of you, and it's not just about taking care of him or helping you. It's more than that." She paused, her hands twisting nervously in her lap. "I've been thinking about what it would mean for me to stay involved in your lives. I've been feeling like maybe I've been acting like a mother to Arian." Ravi's heart skipped a beat. He could see the depth of the feelings Leela was sharing, but it was a conversation he hadn't expected. "Leela, you're part of this family. You've done so much for us. You've become a mother figure to Arian, and we will always be grateful for that." Leela shook her head slowly, her eyes filled with a mix of sadness and understanding. "I didn't just help because I felt sorry for you," she said quietly. "I helped because I saw a child who needed love, a child who needed care. And somewhere along the way, I grew to love him. I've grown to love him like he's my own son." Ravi stood there in stunned silence, trying to process what Leela was saying. He had never imagined that things would get this complicated. He could see the love in Leela's eyes, the love of a mother, not just a caregiver. "Leela," Ravi began slowly, choosing his words with care. "You've been more than kind to us. You've given us a gift we can never repay, but I need you to understand something. Arian is our son. Neha and I, we're his parents. And no one can change that. You'll always be a part of his life, but you are not his mother." Leela looked at him, and for a moment it seemed as though she were going to pull away, to distance herself from the family. But then she took a deep breath and her face softened. "I know, Ravi, I know. I'm not his mother, and I never meant to take that role away from you and Neha." She paused, a gentle smile tugging at her lips. "But I love him, and I want him to know that there's more than one way to be a mother." Ravi felt a wave of relief wash over him, though the conversation had been difficult. He had always respected Leela for the kindness and love she had shown his family. But now he realized that she had become more than just a helper. She had become someone who truly loved Arian. "I understand," Ravi said softly. "I'm so grateful for you, Leela. I can't imagine how much you've done for us. You've been there for us when no one else was, and that means more than I can say. But you're right. We can't replace what Arian has with us. We'll always be his parents, but that doesn't mean you're not important to him or to us." Leela smiled again, her eyes glistening with unshed tears. "I'm happy just knowing that he's loved, that he's in good hands. That's enough for me." The weight in the room seemed to lift as the tension melted away. Ravi understood now that Leela wasn't asking for a title or recognition. She was simply expressing the love she felt for the child she had helped care for. And that was something he couldn't deny. "Thank you, Leela," Ravi said, his voice thick with emotion. "Thank you for being here for us, for being there for Arian. We can't ever thank you enough." Leela reached out and took his hand, her grip strong but gentle. "There's nothing to thank me for, Ravi. I'm just doing what any mother would do. And I know you'll be the best father to Arian." As the days passed, things began to settle. Leela continued to visit regularly, still offering her help when needed. But the emotional distance she had once feared had disappeared. There was no longer a question of who Arian's mother was. Neha and Ravi had that role, but Leela had become a beloved part of their family, a second mother in her own way. For Leela, the most important thing was that Arian had a family who loved him, and that love was enough to heal her own heart. She had given him care, and in return she had received something far more valuable, a deeper understanding of what it meant to love someone unconditionally. And as the seasons changed, so did their family. What had started with a simple act of kindness had turned into a bond stronger than blood, a bond forged through love, compassion, and the willingness to care for each other when life seemed too difficult. It had been several months since Leela had first stepped into Ravi and Neha's lives. What began as a simple act of kindness, a woman giving milk to a father in need, had evolved into something much deeper, something that could not be easily explained. Leela had come to be more than just a helper. She had become family, and though things had not always been easy, there was a quiet sense of peace that had settled over their small home, a peace that they all shared together. Neha had grown stronger with each passing day. Though her health was still fragile, she was no longer confined to her bed. She was able to take care of Arian once again, but there was something different about the way she looked at him now. She saw him not just as her child, but as a reminder of how much love and support had surrounded him. And she knew that none of it would have been possible without Leela. Ravi, too, had changed. The man who had once walked the streets of the city, desperate and ashamed, was now a father filled with hope. His baby boy was healthy, happy, and thriving. And while the road to this point had been long and difficult, it had also brought him a sense of gratitude and understanding that he had never known before. But even more than that, Ravi had realized the power of human connection. In a world that often seemed indifferent to suffering, Leela had stepped forward, offering not just milk for a hungry child, but something much more valuable: love, care, and a sense of belonging. One warm afternoon, Ravi and Neha sat together in their small living room, watching Arian play on the floor. The baby had grown, his chubby little legs now crawling around with newfound strength. He laughed and babbled, completely unaware of the struggles that had once threatened to take everything away from his family. To him, this was simply life. The love and care of two mothers, his biological mother, Neha, and the woman who had given him so much, Leela. Ravi looked over at Neha and smiled. "Can you believe how much he's grown?" he asked softly, his voice filled with awe. Neha smiled back, her face warm with love. "He's a strong boy. He's always been strong. But I think he's been blessed with more than just his health. He's been blessed with people who love him." Ravi nodded in agreement. He couldn't deny that what they had found in Leela was a blessing. The woman who had once been a stranger had come into their lives and, through her kindness, had become a mother figure to their child. Ravi knew that they would never be able to repay her for everything she had done, but they had come to understand that love wasn't something that needed repayment. It was something that simply grew stronger the more it was shared. That afternoon, as Leela arrived with her usual basket of food, she was greeted with smiles and laughter. The bond between them had grown stronger with time, and now when she entered the house it felt as though she had always been a part of it. Leela set down her basket and walked over to where Arian was playing. The baby giggled as she picked him up, and for a moment all three of them watched her, the joy on her face evident as she cradled Arian in her arms. "You're looking more like a little man every day," Leela said, her voice full of affection as she gently rocked Arian. Ravi and Neha exchanged a quiet glance, both of them feeling a deep sense of peace as they watched the woman who had become so important to their family. They had never expected this, never imagined that a simple act of kindness would lead to such a transformation in their lives. But it had, and in the process they had all become something more than they had been before. They had become a family, not just by blood but by choice and by love. "I don't know what we would have done without you, Leela," Neha said, her voice filled with sincerity. "You've been like a mother to Arian. I can't thank you enough." Leela smiled, but there was a hint of sadness in her eyes. "I've never needed anything in return, Neha," she said softly. "I just wanted to see you all happy. That's all." But Neha wasn't finished. She looked at Leela with a newfound determination. "You are a mother to him," Neha said. "You've shown him so much love, and I've seen it in the way he smiles when he sees you. I know he's going to remember you always. You're part of his life, part of our family." Leela blinked, a tear slipping down her cheek. She quickly wiped it away, but there was a look of deep emotion in her eyes. "Thank you, Neha," she whispered. "That means more to me than you'll ever know." Ravi, who had been standing quietly by, now stepped forward. He looked at Leela, his voice steady but filled with emotion. "Leela, you've changed our lives. You've given us more than just help. You've given us a chance to be whole again. I can't thank you enough for that." Leela looked at him, her heart swelling with emotion. She had never expected this kind of love or acceptance. She had only wanted to help, but in the process, she had found something she hadn't known she was looking for: belonging, connection, and a love that was unconditional. As the days went on, Leela continued to visit regularly, but there was a new sense of balance in the home now. Neha had regained most of her strength, and though she still leaned on Leela for support, she was no longer entirely dependent. Arian, now a toddler, was thriving, and his laughter filled the house every day. One afternoon, as Leela stood by the door to leave, she turned to Ravi and Neha and smiled. "I think it's time for me to step back a little," she said, her voice filled with warmth. You both have done so well. I think Aryan will be just fine with you now." Ravi and Neha exchanged a surprised glance, and then they both smiled. They knew this day would come, but it didn't make it any easier. "You'll always be welcome here, Leela," Ravi said. "You've given us more than we could ever repay. You'll always be part of this family." Leela smiled, a gentle sadness in her eyes. "I will always be here whenever you need me. And you'll always have my love, all of you." With that, she turned and walked out the door, leaving behind a home filled with the quiet joy of a family that had come together against all odds. And so, life moved forward. Aryan grew stronger, healthier, and more full of life each day. Neha and Ravi continued to raise him with all the love they had in their hearts. And though Leela had stepped back, her presence was always felt, a reminder of the incredible power of love and kindness. In the end, their story was not just about a man begging for milk for his child. It was about the way love could come from the most unexpected places, the way it could heal wounds, and the way it could bring people together forever.